his crucifixion. This man who they gave up everything to follow is now dead. Where do they go from here? What do they do? They had listened to his teachings, witnessed his healings, the many miracles. Imagine being there, witnessing Jesus feed the 5,000, seeing Jesus raise Lazarus from the tomb, seeing him calm the storm, and then walk on water. The disciples believed that Jesus was the Messiah that they had been waiting for all their lives and for generations before them. Yet now, their leader is dead, tortured and nailed to a cross. He's been dead for 3 days now. As we hear in today's gospel, the disciples lock themselves in the house, in a room hiding from the authorities, in fear that they too would be arrested and killed for being a follower of Jesus. This is the scene that we are entering into today after we heard today's gospel. So there's two feelings that would have overcome the disciples in these days following the crucifixion. Two feelings: guilt and doubt. Guilt and doubt. Guilt that they had abandoned their leader to die on the cross alone. Remember, we only heard that Mary, Jesus' mother, John, the beloved disciple, and Mary Magdalene were present at the foot of the cross when Jesus died. All the other disciples in this house today had run away to save themselves when Jesus was arrested in the garden. The disciples would be feeling guilt because even then they had just professed their loyalty to Jesus that night at the Last Supper, just hours earlier, right before they scattered. Remember, Jesus said, "One of you will betray me. One of you that dips his hand into the same cup, that breaks bread with me, will betray me." And one by one the disciples said, No, Lord, it's not going to be me. Not me. I've got your back. Never would I betray you. It's unheard of. Yet that very night they all scattered when the authorities came to arrest Jesus in the garden. Guilt would have filled their hearts because they abandoned Jesus. Doubt would have been the other feeling that would be filling their hearts at this time. Just days after the death on the cross, Thomas and all the disciples may have been facing some doubt. Was Jesus who he really said he was? Think about it. If their rabbi, if their teacher, if their leader is dead, where do they go from here? How was it that Jesus performed all these miracles and yet is now dead? They may even doubt that what was the point of the last 3 years that we followed him? This isn't how they imagined things to end, because he was the Messiah. He wasn't supposed to die like this, at least not in their mind. So just as these two feelings of guilt and doubt were filling the disciples' hearts in the days following the crucifixion, what happens? These disciples are entering into an all-time low, and Jesus appears to them in the room. Even when the doors were locked, Jesus appears to them. In their darkest time, Jesus comes to them in their darkest moments of guilt and doubt. And what does he say? He says, "Peace be with you." Peace be with you. He says this greeting 3 times. Peace be with you. To help dissolve any guilt or doubt that his disciples may feel at this time for abandoning him. Jesus tells his disciples by saying, "Peace be with you," that he has forgiven them for deserting him on that evening when he was arrested, for leaving him to die on the cross alone. Peace be with you. Jesus forgives them before they even have a chance to ask for his forgiveness. And on top of that forgiveness, Jesus gives them a gift. The gift to forgive sins. Jesus breathes on them and institutes the sacrament of reconciliation. He says, whoever's sins you forgive, they are forgiven. He gives us this wonderful gift that is the sacrament of reconciliation. So instead of returning from the dead 3 days later, showing up to the disciples where they are and asking for an explanation, for an account of why they abandoned him, why they left him to die on the cross, Jesus instead forgives them. He knows the weakness of human heart, and he forgives them even before they have the chance to ask for his forgiveness. Because God knows our hearts. God knows that we are sorrowful, that we are remorseful, that these disciples would have felt this sorrow, this guilt in their hearts that they wish they did not abandon him. And Jesus says, peace be with you, and forgives them. This teaches us that God understands our weaknesses when we sin. Jesus sees our sorrow and comes to meet us in these moments of remorse and guilt when we have fallen in our lives. Thanks to this beautiful event today in the gospel, we now have the sacrament of reconciliation, this wonderful gift given to the church, given to all disciples of Jesus Christ. And you know what? It's so amazing. This is the first thing Jesus does when he comes back from the dead. Doesn't that tell us how important the sacrament of confession is? Jesus came back from the grave to give us the sacrament of reconciliation. He knew that you and I would need forgiveness in our lives, that you and I would experience guilt, remorse, sadness, doubt, and we would need the sacrament of confession, of reconciliation, to make things right again when we fall to sin or into our own selfish desires. Now, doubt was the other feeling that the disciples were facing after the death of Jesus on the cross. We hear this doubt exemplified by Thomas's famous words today. Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands and put my finger in his side, I will not believe. Now Thomas, while he wasn't there for the first apparition of Jesus, he may just be the realist of the group. He may be the one facing the reality, saying there's no way, no one has come back from the dead like this. And he says, unless I see and touch, prove it to me that Jesus rose from the dead. Unless this happens, unless I have proof, I will not believe. And what happens? Jesus sees Thomas's heart, his desire, and his love for Jesus. And so what happens? Jesus shows up again 8 days later. And what does he do? He restores the faith of Thomas and of all the disciples by appearing to them several times in their doubt. And that's a reminder to you and I that when we doubt, the Lord wants to come close to us and help us with this doubt. Now, 8 days later, Thomas is present with the disciples in that same locked room, that locked house, and Jesus appears again because he wants Thomas and all people to believe in the resurrection. Jesus invites Thomas to see the wounds in his hands from the nails. He tells him, put your hand in my side where the spear pierced me. Put your hand there, Thomas. Doubt no longer, but believe. And Thomas, filled with wonder and awe, I can just imagine him dropping to his knees, saying, my Lord and my God. Imagine being face to face with the risen Lord. My Lord and my God, filled with wonder and awe. How else would you or I respond if we were faced with the resurrected Jesus in front of us, showing the wounds in his hands and feet, inviting us to put our hand in his side where the spear pierced him? I think we would just drop to our knees too. And we would be filled with wonder and awe, and our voices would join with Thomas's as we would say, my Lord and my God. Friends, God knows the doubts that we carry in our hearts today. But Jesus wants to strengthen our faith. He wants to restore our trust in Him. But we have to give Him the chance to heal that doubt and to restore our faith. So when we find ourselves maybe doubting, maybe even the resurrection, we doubt Jesus rose from the dead. If we doubt God's goodness for our lives, or even doubt that God loves you as a dearly beloved son or daughter. God loves you like a dearly beloved son or daughter. If we ever doubt that, I encourage you to make a short prayer. It's easy to remember. Use it in times of doubt. It's from that passage in Mark's Gospel, I think it's chapter 9, where this father brings his son to Jesus to be healed. His son is mute and is going through other problems. And he says to Jesus, "Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief." He wants the healing of his son so badly. He brings him to Jesus. He doesn't know how Jesus is going to heal his son. He wants to believe that Jesus can do this for him, to heal his son, to heal the wound in his family. He says, "Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief." I believe, Lord. It's not 100%, but I want you to restore that. I want you to bring it back. Fill me so that I have 100% belief. Help my unbelief. So in our difficult times in life when we may doubt things, I invite you to use this same prayer. Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief. It's easy to remember. And this is a phrase, a prayer that Jesus himself heard when he walked this earth. So it's a prayer familiar to him. Don't be afraid to pray it when you're struggling with doubt or lack of faith or not trusting enough. Just say it to the Lord. You're driving down in the car, you're waking up in the morning, you're staying up at night, struggling with some doubt. Just say it to the Lord. Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. And it's through this prayer Jesus will restore your faith and make his presence known to you, just as he made his presence known to Thomas and the other disciples, restoring their faith in him. When he says, put your fingers in my wounds, put your hand in my side, doubt no longer but believe. Jesus wants us to believe. He wants to remove all doubt. Friends, let's ask God the Father to strengthen our faith in him, to place our trust in his Son Jesus every day. And when times get tough, when we begin to doubt, let's ask him, Lord, I believe, but help my unbelief. So each week when we come here to celebrate Mass, to encounter the risen Lord in Holy Communion, we're encountering the risen Lord when we receive him in Holy Communion. Let us be filled with wonder and awe, just like Thomas was, filled with wonder and awe when we receive him into our hands, into our bodies. At communion, let us say, my Lord and my God.